Lucas Grandsire podcast, episode 32. We keep this thing chugging along. Very excited for this guest today. Of course, joining us with a brand new background with Bruce Lee and the Kempo gloves, Hyon Ko. What's going on, sir? How are you?
Good, man. Yeah, I just put this up. I just got it the other day and I had to flatten it out under the bed and I hung it up. This is the first actual video that I'm doing with the new background. It's all right. I don't know. Some people might think it's weird because for some reason a lot of people think Bruce Lee's just like a weird person, but I don't know. I like him. He's a decent Asian.
But it was weird, kind of right, with the comments when the Tarantino movie came out, and all of a sudden everybody was getting all up in arms about Bruce Lee and stuff. It's a very weird situation for something that to me didn't seem like that big of a deal because it's a movie. But I don't know, man. People get heated about Bruce Lee really quickly.
Yeah, there's a lot of Bruce Lee followers and a lot of the guys that follow Bruce Lee right now they're like in their 40s and 50s. So, they have nothing else better to do except for attack people online, I think. I don't know, but I watched the movie and I thought in my opinion I thought that, Quentin maybe he knew something about Bruce Lee we don't know, or on the flip side maybe he's just a hater and he just wanted to make Bruce Lee look like shit. I have no idea, man, but the movie, I didn't like it too much. I didn't think that movie was very good, but it is my opinion on cinema.
I mean, it was kind of weird because I thought we were gearing up for this big fight scene, right? Like he slams Bruce Lee into the car, and I'm like, here we go. He's drinking milk for whatever reason, and then they stopped it. I was like, what are we doing here? Like, I saw the article, so I was like, we're gonna get this epic fight between Brad Pitt, Cliff Booth, or whatever his name was, and then they kind of stopped it, and I was like, really? Did you have to do a whole article about two actors in a movie where most of the articles were about how many feet were in the movie? Like that seemed kind of odd to me.
Yeah, it is. It is an odd thing, but that's what the world is now. You know what I mean? It's about articles on little minuscule issues on anything to do with entertainment or a portrayal of somebody or something, man. It's just that's how the world works now. That's how the world rotates. Online outrage. That's what it is.
I have to say though, man, we talk about the backgrounds. I did not realize how serious people were about these backgrounds. Like I used to do it at one point. I had my bed in the back. All right, maybe not the best look, right? But people care about what's in the background. Like I thought people came for the interview. They like if people don't like your poster, you're gonna find out real quick.
I'm lucky, man. I haven't had anybody say anything really. Maybe one comment on like, dude, how are you hanging up everything in your background? But that's about it. Like, really, I guess people don't really care about my background so much. So maybe now they're gonna care and they're gonna shit on me all day, every day about like you're gay for Bruce Lee or something. I don't know.
I was thinking to myself, I was like, what can you possibly say about Bruce Lee? It's like, oh, you have a shirtless man behind you. I mean, yeah, but that's fighting, man. Like it's a bunch of shirtless men, and this is what we tune in for.
Exactly. Some people, some people, some people.
How you feel about the Paul brothers fighting, man? I see a lot of people give their opinions on it. It's bad for the sport and stuff. Like, how you feel about it? Do you like it? Do you not care? Like, how you feel about that one?
I think it's good, man. I
Yeah.
think that Jake Paul is doing his thing, man. How can you hate somebody for going out there and well, you could hate, you know what I mean? Because I hate on things all the time. But in my opinion, man, I think if you're getting money, you know what I mean? I'm like I have this mentality of like if you're out there getting money and you're getting money in a way where it's not breaking any laws, you're not doing anything that is illegal, what I mean? You're not doing anything that is against moral code, go get your money. Like Jake Paul is out there training every day hard. I guarantee you he's not just sitting there doing nothing. He's training hard and he's out there to knock people's heads off. And he's done a great job of promoting himself. And man, he's going hard at Dana White, which is so funny to watch. And he's spitting truth bombs, which is another thing that's very helpful. I think that if you don't want to back him, don't back him. I'm not sitting here like trying to promote Jake Paul, but I think he's doing his thing and he might be in the beginnings, in the beginning stages of a successful boxing career because he just signed a big ass deal with Showtime, and that shows you Showtime sees something in him. And if Showtime sees something in him, maybe we should start to dissect him and see what Showtime is like envisioning for Jake Paul, because man, they put that fight against Tyron Woodley real fast. They put it together real quick.
That's the funny. It reminds me of like the Onion article where it was like, the worst person just made a great point. That's how it feels about Jake Paul. Like he's probably one of the worst people you can think of. Not sure why, but you don't like him, and he's knocking guys out, and then Ben Askren, like that's a legit fighter. Doesn't have any hands, but he's a legit fighter, and he's knocking him out. And you're like, oh, all the shit he does, and he's good at fighting too. It's like I can understand why you start to hate on a guy like that. That's good at everything. Like that dude in school that was naturally athletic and was just good at every sport, and it would just make you mad because you're like, well, I suck at everything. How can you just show up and just be good at stuff, just like he's doing with this boxing thing?
Yeah, and he's, at a time when, his brother, right, Logan Paul, he's fighting Mayweather this weekend, which nobody cares about.
No,
I swear to God, really, if you look online and stuff, Mayweather can't even draw attention to this fight. Jake Paul has taken over, man. Like his brother was really famous for a while, and then I didn't even know who Jake Paul was. I knew Logan Paul because he was making those stupid videos, right? And I don't know, I wasn't really a Vine person, but I heard he was doing Vines and stuff like that. But I remember like he was the YouTube videos where he was like doing splits everywhere or something. Like I remember that was something that he did, and he was famous for that, right? And I thought, man, this guy, he's found his niche. But then I didn't even know his brother even existed until probably when he fought. Maybe a little bit ahead of when he fought, like, oh yeah, when he fought Nate Robinson. That's when I heard of Jake Paul. I didn't know about who he was before then. Did you? I had no idea.
listen, man. Unfortunately, like I'm a very young guy. Like everybody's always shitting on me for being a toddler and whatnot. Unfortunately, I was in high school during the Vine days, so Vine popped up. We were in high school. We all wanted to get famous. Obviously, we saw how that worked out, and we all knew about Logan Paul. And he used to be pretty funny. I'm not gonna lie to you. He used to make some stuff. It was kind of funny. And then he's like, "Oh, I have this brother Jake," and it was like universally agreed this guy was a douchebag. Like we did not
Mhm.
like Jake Paul. This guy got a vibe, and the fact that he was using his brother's fame to get famous himself, that's something that rubbed me the wrong way. So unfortunately, this is a guy without wanting to. I guess as a prospect I've been watching rise all these years. I didn't realize he was a Disney guy. I thought it was a joke 'cause I thought every young guy was on Disney. I guess he really was on Disney, which is crazy. But yeah, unfortunately, I've seen the rise, and luckily for him, he's been consistent with how unlikable he is. So to give him credit there's no heel turn. He's just been very consistent with that.
Yeah, he's done a great job, man, and he's gonna continue to do a great job because he's not an old dude. He's a young cat. So the young cat's gonna be around for 10, 15, maybe 20 years. So buckle up. That's all I have to say. Buckle up and embrace it.
But I remember people were talking about, Tyron Woodley, like that's gonna be the guy. Like, oh man, if Tyron Woodley ever boxes him, now that he's boxing him, I feel like people are getting a little scared now. They're like, is he gonna keep his back against the ropes and not throw anything? Like that one kind of feels like people were confident in Woodley as long as he was in the UFC, and now they're like, oh no, what is he gonna do for us? You feel like Woodley could be the guy that finally does a little bit of what people are looking for?
Of course, he could be the guy, but then at the same time, this is boxing and it's not MMA. And we know that Woodley can knock people out, but can he knock people out with those bigger gloves? And on top of that, can he get the angles that the boxer needs to, it's a science, right? So like I'm not gonna sit here and say I know everything about boxing, but you got Jake Paul who's been training strictly boxing, and we've seen that he knows what he's doing. And Woodley, he in his last couple of performances, we haven't seen the Woodley that we saw, when he was knocking out Koscheck, when he was knocking out Robbie Lawler, right? Even we haven't seen the Woodley that was fighting Stephen Wonderboy Thompson in his last couple of fights. So I'm just interested to see if you take away everything except for the hands, what are we gonna see from Woodley, man? I'm kind of edging towards taking Jake Paul in this fight, man. I'm not lying because I predicted, like, I don't want to toot my own horn, but I said that, when they announced the Ben Askren fight, I was like, oh, Jake Paul's gonna get a first round knockout. Like that, you could see that happening. You know what I mean? Even though I hate to say stuff like that, it's like when Connor was fighting Floyd, right? Everybody's like, oh, Connor has a chance. He's got that knockout power. But then I was like, nah, man, Floyd is just too smart, dude. Like he's the greatest defensive boxer of all time. You put a greatest defensive boxer of all time against Conor McGregor, who is a guy that has championship, striking, but it's not like boxing. You know what I mean? It's different. So, like I don't know. It's a toss up, but as the fight gets closer and closer, when's that fight happen? Anyways, I don't even know.
I have no clue. I didn't even know Mayweather was fighting this weekend. I saw all the media out there in Florida, and I was like, I wonder what's going on. They're like, oh, he's fighting the sixth or whatever. Oh, okay, all right. I guess that's a thing that's happening.
Yeah, man, it's weird, man. I don't know. I probably won't watch it live, but for some reason, I would like to watch Jake Paul live.
Yeah.
It's weird. Like, I don't know why. Like, it's like the
Oh man.
spectacle that you can't keep your eyes off of, right? Like, especially with Showtime. I'm just interested to see what Showtime will do because Triller, we already know that. That's just like a clusterfuck of just everything mixed together. It's like a big
Exactly.
old bowl of, you know, stew that, they just took everything of American culture and just threw it in there and then mixed it up and then, put it on pay-per-view, which I didn't mind so much. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I bet you the kids really liked it.
It feels like if someone outside of the United States was like, make an event that described America, that would have been the event. You know, the big boxing match against, the kid nobody likes, a bunch of music, commentators that don't even know what's going on. It did feel very like, if one of my friends in France was like, describe to me what a typical American event would look like, that's exactly what they would describe to me.
It is, and it also reminds me of like something that Saturday Night Live would a
Oh
skit
yeah.
that Saturday Night Live would put on, and that's what it would look like, right? Like, it is a weird thing. Like, when we watch it in real time and dissect it and digest it, it's like we're almost like trained to accept it easier because that's what Jake Paul does. That's what the social media, like all these like stars from YouTube and stuff, that's what they're creating. So, if you watch that over and over and over again, you get used to it. But like you said, people from other countries, they're not used to that style of like media. So when they watch it, they're like, this is not real. This is Hollywood.
Yeah.
That's what they think.
Selfishly, like I hope for these events, what it does, it creates a few guys that are like, I think I might like face punching. Trickles over to the media side where we are, and maybe they get interested and watch more of our content. I don't think so because that's just not what we do. But selfishly, there's a part of me that hopes it benefits us in some sort of way.
Oh yeah, of course, man. Why do you think the major media outlets are all there
That's true.
in Florida? There's a reason for that because these guys, they get clicks and they bring out the headlines, right? When you do an interview with Jake Paul, he's gonna say something that you could write about. It's not like he's just gonna give you this humble act. You know what I mean? If he did, then nobody would care about Jake Paul fighting Tyron Woodley, right? It just wouldn't happen. It would just everybody would just be like, "Yeah, we'll cover it from our basements or whatever," right? But it's not that way. Jake Paul, all the media's down there. They're all covering it. They're all there. They're wishing to be there. I wish I was
Oh,
there
yeah.
just to watch, just to see,
Yeah.
like, just to be there. There's certain moments in covering the sport where you would want to be at that location at that time just to like in my history of covering sports, and I haven't like been to like too many events, like especially like UFC or whatever, but the two biggest moments I think that I've experienced in my life is watching Zhang Wei Li win the title in China when she knocked out Jessica Andrade. I was cage side for that, and that was an incredible moment to just see someone win, and it's history too. You know what I mean? Like the first Chinese champion, and then the other one was Ryzen 20, man, like in the Saitama Super Arena with like 30,000 people, and that's another experience that I will never forget. But yeah, Jake Paul would be like up there, like going to watch that. You know what I mean? I don't know.
Yeah.
Is that shitty to say?
It's shitty to hear. It's not shitty to say. Like you hear it and you're like, man, like, But it makes me think like Ryzen. I have big hopes for Ryzen. Like I feel like if we could get to a point where Ryzen could be like that, because you mentioned it, like neck and neck with like Pride, combating with the UFC. Like there could be so many fun things we have. Like people are talking about MVP, like. He needs to fight more competition and stuff like that. Doesn't that kind of feel like a guy, if we were to put him against Cans and Ryzen, that would fit right into that kind of show? Like, I feel like there's so much potential that we're not exploring with that promotion yet.
Well, MVP did fight. And I was there too when he fought in Japan, for Bellator, right? And
Yeah.
he did fight a Japanese fighter and took him out pretty easy. MVP, he's an interesting character, man, because the way that they like match him up, it's just a lot of people complain about it because they're like, "Oh, he's fighting guys that he should be fighting." But when he does fight guys that are at his caliber, are they really at his caliber? You know what I mean? He did pretty good against Douglas Lima until he got knocked out. And he wrestled against what's his name? Paul Daly, which
Yeah.
we never expected to happen. You know what I mean? We expected MVP to do what MVP does. But then I thought that he showed a lot in those fights. I thought that he is up to that level of those championship fighters, and he knows how to make adjustments because we never expected him to grapple with anybody, and he did with Paul Daly. And Paul Daly's a dangerous dude. We've seen him spark a gang of people, right? So it's just, I don't know. MVP, like he's talking about he wants to go to the UFC. The thing about the UFC is they're not gonna let you do that. They're not gonna
No,
let you go fight some regular dude. They're gonna say, okay, MVP, you're coming in. All right, we're gonna put you against Mike Perry. Let's see what you can do against him first. Okay. And then maybe they even will do him more dirty and put him against like an assassin, like like a Vicente Luque or somebody like that, right? It's just, I don't know, man. MVP, did he waste a couple of years of just fighting nobodies? I don't, that's just a question that he's gonna have to, you know, think about for a while if he does go to the UFC in the next couple of years.
well, here's what I do have to say. I used to be one of those people too that was mad like he's fighting cans and stuff like that. But at the same time, like, why not? Because he's not like boring when he fights these cans.
Mhm.
This is where he's able to throw flying stuff and just do whatever. Why not, right? I mean, some people they want the silverware, the belts and stuff. Maybe he just wants the highlights. Like at the end of the day, could you have a more exciting reel than him fighting cans? Like that's something I've grown comfortable with as he's getting older and balder. Like maybe this is just one of those things that you have to accept that he's going to be in exciting fights, and maybe he's not a belt guy. And I feel like he's making the most of it because you have plenty of guys that would just wrestle fuck a lot of these dudes, but at least he's giving you highlights. He's giving you moments that when you create that highlight reel, you're like, maybe out of fighting cans, he did the most of it.
Oh, he did. He did definitely do the most of it, and maybe that's the target or the goal of Bellator is to do that with MVP. But for us, for people that are following him and his career, we want him to fight the guys that are the threat, right? To
Yeah,
see if he can overcome those threats. And if he didn't mention that he wanted to go to the UFC and test himself, then it would be all right. It would be like, yeah, stay in Bellator, do your thing. But you're talking about you want to go to UFC. They're not going to play around with you in the UFC, man. They're not going to say like, okay, we're going to let you fight 5 cans. And there's no cans, you know what I mean? Like,
right. Yeah,
I think if you compare Bellator to like UFC, there's more, they can bring in more cans in Bellator compared to the UFC, right? When you sign with the UFC, they want you for a few fights. They don't just sign you for like one fight and you're just some regional guy, right? Bellator will do that from time to time. Let's just be realistic about it. So I don't. It's weird. I hope he goes to the UFC. It's not because like, oh, he should be exposed. It's just like, let's see what he can really do. If Bellator's not going to do it, let him go to UFC. UFC will definitely let him do it, right? It's just going to happen. It's going to be violent, and we've seen what happened with Lima. That's another guy, like I love him in Bellator, but man, I just wish we could see him against like a Colby Covington, a guy that's like a pressure wrestler, you know what I mean? Because in the past, like he hasn't done very well against those types of fighters. And he's got a fight coming up next week against him, a
right. Yeah,
tough guy,
yep.
like a guy that's a major threat to the title. So Amasov, I think that's his name.
But Bellator is weird because for a long time, right, we all kind of wanted rankings and we all figured like when you're thinking off the top of your head, you're thinking of these names. They release a top 10 and you realize like top 5, amazing. The bottom 5 is
Mhm.
crap. And we saw that with Valerie Laredo, right? Where she was ranked 8th or 7th, something crazy. And you realize like, okay, maybe that's why they didn't do rankings because you know what? They can't fill out a top 10. So we wanted the rankings. Now the rankings feel silly because the names aren't quite there. I feel like maybe if they made a top 5, but that kind of showed you a little bit of the depth in Bellator when they released that top 10. You realize like, oh, okay, there's a lot of prospects or a lot of people, some most guys I've never heard of before.
Yeah, I still think that there's a lot of prospects in Bellator, and we just need them to fight more.
Yeah,
And once they fight more, they build their record up, and then eventually they're gonna fight the guys that actually have somewhat of a following, somewhat of a name, somewhat credentials in the division. And but that takes time, I mean, the best example you could look at is a guy like Patchy Mix, a guy like AJ McKee, those guys they built up really well, right? And they have a bunch of those guys. They just need to fight though. There's a bunch of like really good wrestlers that are transitioning over to MMA in Bellator. But yeah, when you look at the rankings, it's true that it's top heavy. Like the 5 legit guys, right? Guys that could go any promotion around the world and fight for the title, maybe even become a champion, right? Look at Pitbull. Like this dude is a monster in 2 divisions, right? And like there's no denying that. But there is a pocket of like prospects that just need to fight more that fill out that top 10, especially for those rankings.
I have somebody here in the comments section asking if we've seen Kamaru Usman on Hot Ones. Is that something you managed to catch, his appearance eating the chicken wings?
No, I haven't seen it. I haven't really watched many of the hot ones. It's
Is that not something that piques your interest?
nah. It all depends, you know what I mean? I've seen like highlights, you know what I mean, or like little clips, but I've never like sat down and watched many of those hot ones. But I know what it is. I've heard about it. And who have I watched? I haven't watched anybody all the way through, because if I did, I'd probably remember.
I mentioned the idea in MMA. I was like, what if we did something like that? We're not chicken wings, so there's always someone doing it. But I was like, what if we did some kind of challenge? And one guy created one thing where fighters ate hot noodles while getting interviewed. And if you
Mm.
mention that, they will come at you aggressively and tag him and call you an idiot. And it's like, all right, got one guy doing one thing, but maybe we can diversify. You know what I mean? Like I'm trying to think outside the box instead of
Yeah, yeah.
fighters complaining about the media. But man, the people were not having it.
Yeah, well, everybody complains about the media, you know. Now fighters are doing their own media. Like there's so many fighters that have their own shows, their own podcasts, and that's a way of them to, control what they put out there, right? But I don't know. It is hard, man. It is hard to kind of find uh, a way to become more successful in media. But MMA media is so different from any other media because it's just starting out. Like there's established names, but it's not like any other sport, right? Other sports, there's so much opportunity across the board, right? This one is very limited. MMA is very limited because it is a niche sport still. So you do have to find something on your own, and there's very many different angles, right? You could go independently and build your own audience, and there's guys that have done that. Like there's YouTubers that only talk about MMA, and they have like tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of subscribers, right? But then there's guys that are doing it like by writing and stuff. So I don't know. It's like the noodle thing. It's like it's not original. Let's just be real, because
Yeah.
they've been doing it. Other YouTubers have been doing it for. The noodles are Korean. Like I've eat those noodles. They're not hot.
Really?
Yes. I don't understand like why people think that shit's hot. Like it's not hot. Like people are like, oh, drinking milk. I'm like, come on. If that's hot, then you can't eat hot stuff, man. Like maybe I'm just like this. Maybe I'm just an Asian and my mouth is just hot when I was born out the womb or something. I don't know, but I don't know. Like I don't understand why that's so spicy.
Well, to be fair, it is a bunch of English guys doing it. So, in England, you know what they say, they tend to boil their food in water, which is, I guess, one way of cooking things. So, can you really blame them if they find salt and pepper hot? So, obviously, they
Mhm.
will find the noodles hot. You know what I mean? Like, just give them a little bit of credit over there in England.
Yeah, yeah. But Abdul, he's a good dude, man. He's a
Yeah.
cool guy. And but like it's funny. I guess it's for the reaction, because like I understand that a lot of people, they're not used to spicy food in their daily life. So when they do eat something like that, it is extremely spicy to them. But I don't know. I don't know. Like if I did it, I'd just be eating it and be like, okay, like what's
Yeah.
next? Let's go to the next. Like I'd be more interested in doing hot ones because I know that shit will get hotter and hotter and hotter, right? Maybe you should do that. Like get noodles, like 50 noodles, and then like each one is level of hotness. Because like here, sometimes I'll put these like peppers in my noodles. Dude, it's so hot that when you're cooking it, you're coughing.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's how hot it is. Like in the house, like your eyes is burning and shit. Like that, So maybe I should do that. Maybe I should make some noodles and then send them to them and be like, okay, put these peppers in the noodles and then eat them. People probably shit in their pants.
I tried cooking with because here we have the Chipotle and they're like you make it adobo sauce with the Chipotle pepper. So I bought some Chipotle peppers. And the first time I did it, I didn't realize you have to marinate, throw the marinade away. So I cooked the peppers with it, and everyone's coughing, crying in the kitchen. I'm like, come on,
Mm.
guys, it's not even hot, even though I'm crying. And then
Yeah.
I ate them. Oh my god, I finished it, but I was in tears. At first you try to keep your mouth closed, and by the end you're just doing the disgusting that kind of thing. It was so bad. I'm crying, and then everybody's like, "Lucas, you don't have to finish it." I am a man. I will finish this, but I will regret it very
Hmm.
soon. But when you start crying just cooking it, like when the smoke itself starts to get you, that's how you know. Okay, maybe just throw the peppers away next time.
Maybe I'm just being a spice elitist, and
But it's a
it's
good thing to
coming out.
be if you can do it. If you can do it, right? If you're not one of those guys that cries at regular hot sauce, like you gotta flex that muscle too.
Yeah, sriracha. Do you think sriracha sauce is hot?
No, no,
Yeah, that's just
no.
like it has a little tang to it. You know what I mean? It's not. I like it. I put sriracha on a lot of stuff, right? And I even like the original American hot sauce, Tabasco,
Yeah.
with that vinegar taste. I like that on chicken. You know what I mean? Like I've done it all. Like I grew up in the States, so I've been exposed to all those spices. That's what's great about the States, man. States has every food you can think of, like are from everywhere. So if you want to dibble and dabble, man, the US is the best. The US supermarkets, I've been around to many supermarkets around the world. Man, the US is the best. Like, I ain't gonna deny that.
Man, it's true because when I was living in France, like, doing my own grocery shopping and stuff, it's like, even like, say the pasta alone in France, you might have four choices. In America, it's like you have brands you didn't even know existed. I mean, there's so many, macaroni and cheese. In France, it's like we
Mhm.
have one hot sauce. It's the Tabasco. It's all right, but it's not. In America, it's like you have a whole row of them. You get to choose different colors and stuff. You don't truly appreciate the greatness. I mean, even I don't know if you saw it, the Cheetos macaroni and cheese. You could never find that outside of the United States. Like that. And I sent a picture of it to my friends in France. Like, look at this thing. They're like, that is the most American thing I've ever seen in my life. I was like, you got to appreciate this great country, man, when you're in it.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And the what is it? The macaroni and cheese, the Kraft, man, that shit is straight garbage. I hate
Yeah.
that. Like, I hate like it tastes so generic. I don't understand why people like it so much. Like that powdered cheese. Like, you might as well sniff that. Like, what are you doing? Like, get that. Like, I will never eat that shit again. Like, I hate it. But
Well, it's for
yeah,
kids,
man.
man. Like you don't feel like cooking, but you want to say you cooked. You make. I mean, that's what I've gathered. But growing up in a French household, we don't have macaroni and cheese. The cheese you put on your pasta is like some Parmesan on top of something
Yeah,
else. Like
yeah.
people are like, "What do you mean that pasta is coated with the cheese? What is this?" And then no, because in France we're very snobby. There's no one that's going to be like, "Oh, what is this culinary and mate?" It's like, nah, put that shit in my kitchen. We're gonna have a problem. So haven't been able to sell it to anyone, and I guess especially not the craft.
Nah, not Kraft, man. Get out of here with that.
So I have to know. You mentioned it a little bit, but I'm curious. Like, what's your story? How do you end up? I believe you're in Korea now. Spent some time in the United States. What's the story there? Like, what are you able to tell us from that?
When I born in Korea when I was I think maybe 4 years old. I moved to the States, like on the East Coast, like near Baltimore, and stayed a couple years over there, elementary school. Then went back to Korea, stayed a couple years, and then went back to the States when I was in like sixth grade, and I lived in Georgia, probably the most racist
You lived
place
in
I've
the
ever
South,
lived.
yeah,
Like, especially like I'm the only Asian person in a school of like 2,000 people. You could imagine like how racist that is, right? Just
yeah.
like it's like Where's Waldo, right? Like, it's really bad, right? Like those are some terrible memories right there. But then after like going to school in Georgia, like near Savannah, I moved to like Tacoma, which is like 30 minutes south of Seattle, and I spent most of my teenage years over there in that area. And yeah, and after that went to school, and then in 2004, yeah, 2004, I moved back to Korea, and that's when Pride was going on. And I didn't watch MMA. I watched MMA when it first started with Hoist Gracie, when UFC 1, 2, when that was on pay per view. I actually watched those live on pay per view. Well, I don't know if they were live, but they were on pay per view because my friend in my neighborhood, when I was in middle school, his brother was huge into martial arts. So like he just had it on and he was making this huge event of it. And we're just like, we're middle school kids. We're into football and basketball. You know what I mean? We're into going outside and getting into some shit, right? So he's just like, hey, check this out. This is crazy. So that's when I first like watched it. But after that, I wasn't like other people like, oh yeah, I went to the first Gracie Jiu-Jitsu gym I ever saw. Like that's not my story, right? I always continued to play basketball and football because that's my dream or whatever, right? And then my dreams crashed and burned, and then I just did my thing, went to school, and then 2004 I came back to Korea, and Pride was on TV like live, every weekend, blah blah, all the events and stuff, and I started watching that again, and then that's when Fedor and Rampage and all those guys was fighting, and I just watched it. I was just a fan, like when it was on, I watch it, And then in 2000, like 10 years later, right? That's when I started to like, that's when I thought like maybe I should see like the coverage of MMA in Asia, right? And I found this website called asianmma.com, and I was just like, all right, let me reach out to them. And then I got in contact, and then I was like, hey, do you guys need anybody to, write some stuff? Because I had no idea like what to do, right? I was just like, you guys, is anybody helping you with the website? And one person was running the website, and they're like, no, it's just me. And I was like, okay. And I wasn't thinking like, oh, I'm gonna get paid. I was like, let me just try it. Let me see if I could what I can do. It's interesting. So I just started writing, and I think it was like 2014. I wrote my first article for UFC Macau. It was like, it's weird and very ironic. Tyron Woodley versus Stun Gun, Stun Gun Kim, that fight, right? And yeah, in that event, Michael Bisping, Kung Lee, I think that was the same show. Yeah, that's when I started. And I did it for a while. It was fun. I would go to local shows from the start, doing play by play and all that stuff, and then writing recaps, having no idea what I was doing. Right, so they would shoot, like the person that was running the website, they would help me, but still, had no idea. Just continue that, and then I just burnt out, stopped for a while. Did it once in a while, and then I think in 2017 or 18, that's when I started to realize, okay, maybe I should, like set some roots and then just like attack this and see what I can do with it. And yeah, and then I started like Kumite Radio, which turned into Kumite TV. And then that led to like other opportunities to where I'm right now, working for like multiple websites, doing interviews, and all the contacts that I created throughout the years, they've all helped me to get the bigger interviews nowadays, right? And kind of like networking and stuff like that. And I think that's the most important thing is, I don't know. Like, I think a lot of people, when they get into it right away, especially now where they see like successful people in it that have done it, like a James, or like a couple other guys out there, they think it's like the path is so short, but the path is not short, because we see so many guys come in and do a couple interviews or write some articles, and then we never hear from them again. We see that all the time, right? So like building the network, and I don't know, never giving up, I guess, because I've had times where I just like, man, forget this, I'll quit. Like, it's not worth it, and I'm pretty sure you've had that before too. And a lot of people have it, but it's all about like improving a lot of YouTube tutorials on like how to do things. And yeah, and I'm still learning, right? I'm still learning. I'm still trying to improve myself. I'm still trying to grow as a person that speaks with people. Cause I look at some of my interviews that I did like even 2 years ago. I'm just like, dude, like you sound terrible. And then I watch the interview that I do now, and I'm just like, it's a totally different person. Like, it flows a lot better. And yeah, man, it's just, that's kind of like in a nutshell. If I go deeper into it, it's like 10 hours story.
Yeah.
But that's basically where I'm at right now. I mean, just building relationships over the years, kind of focusing on certain pockets of the world that didn't have any coverage, especially the Australian, New Zealand scene, to the point now it's like I know in the UFC from those areas, and I get access to them because of what I did 5 years ago, right? And it helps a lot, man. And I think a lot of people, and I know everybody says this all the time, like, covering the UFC is not gonna, help you in this beginning, but it is true. Like, you need to go to the regional scene and establish yourself a little bit, and then you'll start to cover the bigger promotions. But some people are lucky, man. Like, there's guys like the Schmo, like he stepped in and just like went to the top on a rocket ship instantly. You know what I mean? Some people are, I don't want to say lucky, but luck has to do a part of it, man. It is a big part of it, luck. It's not like, oh, you just worked hard and it happened. No, you worked hard, certain people saw what you're doing, and that is part of the luck, man. Some people respect you for what you do, some people don't, man. It's, everybody has their own opinion about what you're doing. It's not like everybody enjoys your content, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? There are people that are going to watch it and they're going to hate it. They're going to hate your face, they're going to hate like your background, you know what I mean? They're going to hate something, okay? And then some people, they don't care about that, and they just like your conversations with the fighters, or they like your writing. It's, you got to face that. I think once you face that, not everybody's going to like what you do, and there's going to be people that are going to hate on you, then then you're gonna do better with your content. You're gonna be more comfortable with yourself. But it took me a while, man, to be comfortable with myself. I really didn't want to be in front of the camera for a long time. But then I realized, man, this is what I need to do. I need to get better at this. And yeah, and writing is cool, and I'm getting better at that even to this day. But I'd rather be in front of the camera, which is weird to say because at the start I didn't want to. But yeah, I just rambled for like 15 minutes, but you know.
It's something interesting you touched on is seeing like the guy you've never heard of, and then they release like 3 interviews with huge names that you look at and you're like, I don't even know how the fuck I would start booking that. And it's like they'll talk to like Valentina, Luke Rockhold, and like a Kamaru Usman of all people. You're like, how the fuck they booked that? This guy you've never heard of. 3 big interviews. You're like, is this guy really gonna surpass? And then he just disappears. Like, what happened? What was the point of all that? Like, it's just some people they try out and they think like, James Lynch always says it, right? People want to interview Max Holloway and stuff like that. But like you mentioned, you got to start with the prospects. And a big thing I did during the pandemic when everything shut down in 2020, I was like, I'm going to focus on different regions. And one of those regions was Australia and New Zealand, where I'm talking to guys like EC Fitikifu and guys like that. And I'm looking for interviews and stuff. And there's one guy that talked to every single one of them. And that was you. And every time I was like, oh, this guy, John, this guy's on top of it every single time. And, and I'm watching them and it's helpful to, get there. But I'm like, listen, when all these guys get signed to the UFC, you already had them and you've been interviewing them for a while. And that's the way to go. I feel like you have to get a good mix of the prospects, but if you can still book a big name, like you should go for it too. Cause you do have to try to get some eyeballs on that on the channel too.
Yeah, definitely. But the thing is, like, sometimes those regional guys get more views than the UFC guys because
Yeah.
they support. There's the support around them. Because sometimes when certain fighters get to the UFC, the local support kind of dwindles. It's like, okay, you made it. So they're not
Yeah.
sharing the interviews as much. They're not commenting as much because you kind of made it yourself, you know. You didn't make it, but you made it to the top
Yeah.
promotion, one of them. Well, UFC is the top promotion. But another thing I think that's important to remember is that you gotta stop. I think a lot of people they're worried about what someone else is doing too much too. Like they're worried about like, oh, why is this person in this position and why am I not in that? Like a lot of people get like I even went through that a lot, man. Like coming like the past few years, like how come I'm not getting this opportunity? And I know well established guys in this industry. They even still think about that. They still even think about like, how come I'm not getting this opportunity at this place or this outlet, and this guy is getting the opportunity. But then you gotta realize, like, hey man, those are like that's the devil. That's the devil in your mind, just creeping in and telling you to just quit, just stop doing it. You're worth, and you gotta stay away from them. That's what I realized the past couple of years. I gotta stop thinking about other people and what they're doing so much, and just worry about what I'm doing because that's what I can control. And yeah, man, and it's helped me a lot, man. It has helped me a lot, and I've met some good people along the way, and yeah, and a lot of good acquaintances in this industry. And there's guys that I have no connection to, right? And it's good to see certain guys that you have no connection to pay some respect to what you're doing, and give you compliments and stuff like that. And you got to take that and ride with it, man. You got to ride with that stuff. But yeah, I think for me myself, like you mentioned, there's guys that come in and they're doing these couple big interviews and then they disappear. That's just good for you. That's just good for you because it's like, okay, that's another one that's gone, right? Don't worry about it. That's like half the time I'm not even watching interviews unless I'm researching for an interview that I have. Other than that, like most of my like intake of content is Twitter. Because
Yeah.
Twitter has everything, right? Like Facebook, get out of here. Instagram, I don't care. Twitter is MMA. That's where MMA lives, right? So if you're not on Twitter and you're involved in MMA, I don't understand what you're doing with your life.
You're exactly right about the looking at other people because there's plenty of times where you'll see like a guy pick up a gig and usually you're happy for him, but then there's that part of you that's like, fuck, man, like why couldn't that have been me? It's like, but then you also have to realize like if you're good enough, that opportunity is going to come at some point. And maybe it's about proving yourself by making enough content or showing that you can be consistent, whatever it is. But, I had to realize that too. It was like, you know what? Maybe everybody can eat. Like it's that person's time right now. I just got to keep going. And, just because they made it doesn't mean an opportunity won't come up for me. But it's like you mentioned, it's frustrating. There are times you want to look at it and you're like, what the fuck am I doing this thing? Or you're stuck with, maybe a smaller outlet and stuff like
Mhm.
that. But I mean, if you keep going at it, eventually things are going to happen. And I mean, even for you, for example, you're becoming the Korean James Lynch. Like every single outlet employs you at this point in MMA. Like you see things happening for yourself, but I feel like the consistency, which we mentioned, like the big names that just disappear, that consistency seems to be the most important thing at this point.
Another thing too is like going back to the the prospects and the regional scene. Like this is another thing that's happened. Me personally, like I'll be interviewing, let's say a prospect on the regional scene, and I have a good relationship with them, but they didn't have a manager at that time. But then all of a sudden they build up this momentum, right, to where a big management group signs them. Now I have a foot into this big management group that I never had before. I have like now I have some kind of communication with them because I have a relationship, a private relationship with one of their prospects, one of their fighters that they want to, grow in the industry. And it helps me now. I'm maybe get access to their bigger names eventually. I mean, it's not like they're just going to give it to me right away, but you build that, you interview other, fighters in that management group. And then all of a sudden you get surprised, man. I get surprised all the time, like stuff that I don't expect to happen. It just happens sometimes, and I'm just fortunate that it does, man. But it's all like networking and continuing and even if you're not interviewing like UFC fighters, you just got to put some stuff out there, right? Which is just talk with some guys from the local scene. I mean, there's so many guys around the world that you can talk to. It's limitless.
The management thing, I've seen both sides, like, where you say, like, you get a foot in the door, and sometimes the manager comes in, they'll cut off everybody. And an
Mhm.
extreme example of that was, like, Israel Adesanya, for example. Like, a lot of people, when he was on the come up, if you're paying attention, you realize, okay, this is a guy, like, you got to get on before he gets big, before he gets to the UFC and stuff like that. And I was one of those people that I chased this guy, and finally I get an email address. I get an email address, which leads to a phone number, which I can just send a text, and I can talk to this guy at any time, which is incredible. Management came in, Paradigm, they cut off all the media. They were like, the only people that can talk to him are Luke Thomas and Ariel. And then you're sitting there, you're like, fuck, man. Like, we cultivated this relationship. I feel like he knows my name, which is probably incorrect. But still, like, that's part of the grind. And then you see like the management come in, they cut off everybody, and it's frustrating. And all you can do is just, keep doing what you're doing with other guys. But when you see that happen, it can be good. And then there's the other side where it's like, fuck, man, they come in, they just trim all that little excess media for their fighters.
It's part of the game, man. It's part of the game. Like I have a very short memory. So it's like once something happens, I'll think about it and maybe I'll be angry or frustrated, but then a couple days later, I'm moving on to the next one, man. Like Swiss beats on to the next one, man. That's what it is. Like it's if you don't have that, you're gonna be dwelling, man. And dwelling is like I said earlier, it's that devil that's creeping into your mind, dude. Like that like I'm dwelling and thinking about things and thinking about other people and what they're doing. And it's like, man, if you do that, you might as well just don't even do it. Just be a fan, dude, and just like hang out and watch fights because it's just not gonna help you at all. But yeah, man, it happens. Like you just said, it happens, to certain fighters. Like me, even though I had like good connections with like New Zealand and Australia, I just never got in contact with Israel myself. And I know a lot of people that are close with them, you know what I mean? It's just I don't the thing is like I try not to use that to get close to certain fighters, especially if
Yeah.
they're already big, because it could kind of make you look, I don't know, maybe desperate a little bit. Like, hey man, could you like drop a line to what's his name? It's like, some guys, I guess if you're close to them, you could do that, but just a guy that you talk to, you know what I mean? Like on a like every 4 months or 5 months, it's I don't know. I might make you look bad. I have no idea, but like people say, you gotta shoot your shot. It all depends on what kind of shot you're shooting, right? Like I'm very careful with that. Like especially like on Instagram, you see like on certain Instagram posts, like dudes are in the comments asking for interviews.
Yeah.
Like I see that all the time. I'm just like, man, I've never done that in my life. Like I don't think I would ever be on comments just spamming comments to like fighters asking for interviews. But like you said, shoot your shot because you never know. The fighter might be like, "Hey man, this guy he wants it." You know what I mean? Like he's really trying to get an interview. Let's give him a chance. So there's ways to do it and there's ways not to do it. It's just all on like your perception and what your opinion is. So if you can do it, man, as long as you're not fucking people over,
Yeah.
I'm cool with it, man. Do what you need to do.
I'm the same way. Like I like to keep things behind the scenes. And there was one guy when I was still on the come up and stuff, booking a lot of interviews. I asked this writer because somebody had told me like if you have someone from the same website that interviewed someone, maybe they can help you book the interview. So I asked this writer, this young guy, I was like, hey man, you think you can help me book an interview with Mark DeCasey? Because I was like, they interviewed and stuff. He's like, sure thing, man, you got it. I go on Twitter 2 minutes later, and there it is in capital letters. Hey, Mark, my bro Lucas wants to interview. I was like, what the fuck are you doing? What is wrong with you? Why are you putting this in a tweet? Why are you tagging me? Why are you tagging him? I was so mad at him. I was like, you know what? I'm never asking anybody for anything again because something like that makes me look bad. And I'm doing my best to ignore everything about it. And it just, you look at it like, come on, man, you got to keep all this stuff in house.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely do. Definitely you got to keep it in the DMs, in the emails. That's basically where your life revolves right there as
Yeah.
a media member is keep it private. I mean, you don't want to put that out there too much, but yeah, some people, man, I don't know. The game is so young that a lot of people when they enter it, they don't know the rules, so they just do whatever, I guess it's just immaturity in some ways, but I don't know, man. It's also common sense too, man. It's like,
Yeah.
don't you have any common sense? Just people don't want you to put that shit out there like that.
It looks so bad. Like, how does it? Everybody comes in. Everybody wants to be Ariel Hawani, right? So you try to. What does he do? How does he look professional? Has he ever put on Twitter, "Hey, man, my bro wants to talk"? It's like, come on, man. Like, I understand not everybody's Ariel, but at least model yourself after guys know what they're doing. Like, could you imagine one of those people putting up a tweet like that? Like, that would never happen. Like, like you said, common sense. Just think about it. Does this look like something like a legit guy in this industry would do?
Yeah, I don't think so. And like you said, but the goal is to get to that point where you could talk shit to fighters online, right? To where you're so big that it's like, hey, you can say whatever you want. It's just, long as you make a legit point, right?
Yeah.
It's all good. But none of us are at that point yet. So, you know, yeah.
Ma-
I guess yeah, you could bother yourself after him, but some of the things you were not able to do, like go
Nah.
back and forth with Darren Till and all of
No.
that stuff, that's not gonna happen.
I tried doing something a little bit similar one time. I was like, listen, it'd be funny if like there's a fighter I had been chasing for an interview and we talked back and forth, could never make it happen. And so I thought I would just do it, not on Twitter, but there was like on a Twitter spaces, if people do kind of know what I'm talking about. So I was like, maybe it'd be funny if I hopped on, like, why are you ducking me, bro? Kind of thing. And it turned into such a huge deal that I realized, like, when it's happening, like, oh, fuck, what did I just do? And then it turned into a huge thing. It's like, all right, I guess I'm at that point. I'm not at that point where I can argue back and forth with the Darren Till. No, you ducking me, bro. None of that, because that was like the quick, the fire starts and like, oh, fuck, I fucked up on this one. Like, people aren't necessarily joking like that. And I just made a big mistake.
Yeah, I try to stay off of like other people's streams,
Yeah,
unless I really know them really well. It's just, it's just not, it's kind of like a recipe for disaster in a way where it's like, man, you could say one thing, but your intentions are good, but they don't take it as good intentions.
exactly.
And they take it as in like a threat in a way, or
Yeah,
like something that's like you're coming at them sideways or you're out of pocket or something like that. So it's yeah, man. That situation I heard a little bit about it,
yeah.
and yeah, maybe a little bit overreaction to it,
Well, I mean, I
but
fucked up, so I owned up to it.
yeah,
But then at the same time, it's like I can't say like, "Come on, man!" Like some people definitely took that the wrong way. But so yeah, I get you learn. You know what I mean?
yeah,
You learn from it. Just
definitely.
whatever. Don't do don't do that
Definitely,
shit
definitely
again.
you learn. And yeah, man, I've went through that before. Like I've interviewed a fighter and this was years ago. I interviewed a fighter and then they were just going off on Leslie Smith when she was like, talking about, the UFC and like how they're screwing everybody over and all of that. And this fighter came on and it was like, like just like digging into Leslie Smith, right? And my dumbass made a mistake of tagging Leslie Smith in
Ooh.
the highlight of the video, And then Leslie Smith came back, right, and said some stuff, and then I realized, like, okay, because I never said anything about Leslie Smith. I
Yeah,
just tagged
exactly.
her, right,
Yeah,
and then I realized after that, I was like, oh shit, like I should never ever tag another fighter when they're talking about the other fighter, right? It's just like that should not happen. And I learned that lesson. So after that, I'm so careful about jumping on other people's streams or watching. If I'm watching, I'm just watching, right? I'm just watching. No, you don't even know I'm there, right?
right.
I'm just
Yeah,
there
exactly.
watching. And yeah, it's just, yeah, but sometimes you do have to make those mistakes to realize, okay, this is the way that I need to move in this industry, and be selective of like what I do.
Yeah,
But yeah, you live and you learn, man. You just gotta move forward and move past it, because eventually everybody forgets.
exactly.
Everybody forgets. Like it's just that's just the world, man. The world goes so fast nowadays that you could do something last year, and it 1 year later nobody even remembers what happened, right? So
The funny thing it made me realize too was like people don't know who you are like outside of this MMA stuff. Like the guy that you think that's talking to the fighters and stuff, but it's like people don't know the real me like outside of the fighters or interviewing the fighters and doing the podcast, right? Like you realize like I told my friend like what happened. And I was like, me since forever, and he's like, bro, you stupid. You know what I mean? But if you knew me, you'd be like, bro, you would do some dumb shit like that. But then you realize like these online people, they don't know who you are. They know like what you kind of put out there on Twitter and stuff, but it's crazy to me. Like you feel like you know people, and in reality, it's like it's all. What is it? George St. Pierre said it's on an illusion.
yeah, it is. It is. And some people, you're right. Some people, what they portray is not really who they are. You know what I mean? And but the thing is, like me, I'm who I am though. Like, of course I'm very careful of what I say, you know what I mean? Because you don't want to offend, you don't want to go too deep, you know what I
Yeah,
mean? Too deep and say something stupid, but there's a lot of people out there, they're not who they are, like outside of the sport, you know what I mean? But you know what's good about this sport too is like when you run into people that know who you are, and you're like, "What? You know who I am? Like, you know what I do?" And he's like, "Yeah, I've been watching." Like other journalists, like especially in Asia, like other journalists from like other countries that cover the sport. Like sometimes I run into them at shows in like certain places, certain countries, and they be like, "Yeah, I know who." I have no idea who they are. No idea. Like I have no idea. Like almost everybody, I have no idea who they are. And they come up to me and they're like, "Hey, I've been watching your interviews," and then I've built relationships off that. Like guys, they're like showing the respect, you know what I mean? And I'm just like, respect to you. And then I start watching what they're doing, and they're doing good work, you know what I mean? Like shout out to my guy Mike Miguel from the Philippines, dude. That dude, like he came up to me at a UFC show. I had no idea who he was, and then I realized, oh, I do know who he is. I just didn't know his name. And yeah, and we're cool, man. Like it's and he, like he got the like the plug in the Philippines, and if he comes to Korea, I got the plug in Korea. So that it works out like that. It's always sometimes you get those good relationships out of it.
but that's the thing too about this industry. I feel like you have to market yourself too. You know what I mean? Like a lot of people, it's like I never want to make it about myself, but I feel like you kind of do though. You don't have to go full schmo with it. Where it's literally all about you and you happen to have a fighter, but you do have to at some point put your name and put yourself out there to where people want to watch what you're doing. Because everybody says like, why would I watch you over this other person? It's like you don't have to watch me over it. You can watch everyone. You know what I mean? Like I know for me, I have a different podcast I listen to, and it's not like because I'm listening to this one, I'm not listening to you. So but I do feel like come back to the point, like you do like these people you never heard of. Like it's also a question of how are they putting themselves out there too. Like if all you do is write articles and you never post anything on Twitter, like you do have to try to build a following. I feel like in order to be successful in this industry.
Oh, you do have to do that, and you have to work on that too. And it, it's never something that you could predict. It's like
Yeah.
sometimes it works, and sometimes you get a lot of followers at once, and sometimes you don't get any for a long time. But you can't let that discourage you. And on top of that, like myself, I mean, a lot of people will say like, oh, this has been happening for years. A lot of people be like, oh, you're the Arrow Hawani of Asia, or you're the Asian Arrow Hawani, or you're the James Lynch of Asia, and Asian James Lynch. I'm like, I ain't none of those guys.
Right.
Like that's not me. Like I don't want to be the Asian Arrow Hawani. I don't want to be the Asian James Lynch, even though James Lynch is my boy. But it's like I don't want to be him. You know what I mean? Like I'm different from him. Like you just said, you have to separate yourself. And it's like people are trying to label me as like this person from North America that I'm just doing what they're doing.
Yeah.
It's like, am I? and then I think I have to think about that. Like, am I doing that? Am I doing exactly what they're doing? Because I don't want to be them. I just want to be myself. You know what I mean? But I guess people are gonna label you no matter what. So you just gotta accept it. You know what I mean? And be like, all right, it's all good. You know, if they're putting my name next to their name, even though they shouldn't, who am I to tell them not to? You know what I mean? Just do what you do. You know what I mean? Like, because for someone that's over here on this side of the world, like disconnected from North America, because if I was in North America, maybe I wouldn't have like what I have right now. That's the thing I look at it too. It's like if I was in North America, because the competition is so steep over there, because there's so many people covering the sport, right? At at every level, that maybe because I am over here on this side of the world, I do have somewhat of an advantage over certain people. I don't know. You know what I mean? Maybe it's worked out for me in that way. And I'm grateful if it has. And that's why I probably will never go to the States. Yeah.
People think they're being nice too. Like you're the Korean Ariel Hawani. It's like I like where your head's at. You know what I mean? It's like I can see why you would think that's a positive. But at the same time,
Mhm.
it's like, do you need another Ariel Hawani that has a different nationality? Like, do you need another guy, or do you need like myself and what makes me different? Because so many people, I feel like growing in this industry is understanding that everybody starts off, I want to be the next Ariel Hawani. But, there is an Ariel Hawani and he's doing great. But, it's so young. There's room for, your own whoever it is. Like, you don't have to be the next anybody. Look at James Lynch. Somebody says James Lynch is the next Luke Thomas or whatever. Nah, James Lynch is James Lynch. So it's crazy to me that so many people, it's like you said, the next Ariel Hawani this, next Luke Thomas that. It's like, you don't need that. This industry is too young to be doing that.
Yeah, man, it is. But hey, man, it's fun though. It's fun. I enjoy it, and I enjoy talking to fighters. That's what I enjoy the most. So at the end of the day, I'm doing what I like, and that's all that matters.
All right, man. Listen, to wrap up the podcast, I always let people plug their stuff, man. So you got a ton of websites, social media, all that stuff. But if you have anything you want to plug on the way out, man, now's the time to do it.
Yeah, just JHK MMA on everything, man. On Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. I'm most active on Twitter because that's where MMA lives, like I said earlier in the podcast. And yeah, I have a weekly podcast with James Lynch on Fantasy Fanatics MMA. I also have a weekly live chat on SEMP MMA, which I do a lot of interviews for them too. I do a lot of work for them. I also do work for SportsKeeda. I've been working with them for the past couple of months, and yeah, they're building themselves up. So it's a decent. They're building their following, so they're pretty decent. They're hard workers. Um, Fight Nights Picks, I do interviews for them from time to time, and Asian MMA. If you go to AsianMMA.com or AsiaMMA.com, I do a lot of Asian MMA coverage over there for them. Actually, tonight I'll be going to a show and covering the show. And that's about it, man. Just follow me on Twitter and yeah, and just do my thing, man. Nothing special. Um, that's it, man. And thank you, Lucas, for the time, man.
All right, man. Well, thank you for coming on the podcast. Thank you for the people making it to the end, and we'll see you guys next time.